What's up, you guys? Today's animated series review is about a superhero who goes up and beyond his way to protect his city from numerous different villains while trying to adapt into customs that are required to be human, as well as a proper etiquette on how to be civilized. And I'm talking about The Tick. The Tick, the animated series, aired in 1994, containing one season with a total of 36 episodes. Our story begins with a very mysterious introduction to the one and only blue muscular superhero named The Tick, as he partakes in a tryout within the National Super Institute in Reno, Nevada, with the goal of wanting to become a protector from crime and recognized as a savior to mankind. Once demonstrating his abilities by going through rigorous means to be accepted by his super strength, he eventually gets assigned and relocated to a city called The City. Upon arriving there, he befriends a superhero in training named Arthur, who once was an accountant but gets fired from his job after deciding he wanted to be a full-time hero and for the fact that he's the only one in the office wearing a costume. Not to mention, despite being a moth, people confuse him for a giant bunny. As Arthur graciously accepts the Tick as his friend regardless of his weird behavior, they eventually become partners, with Arthur being a sidekick, and provides him a place to stay in his apartment, which the Tick likes to call it the headquarters, and sleeps on the sofa. One thing to note is that within the city, there's also numerous different superheroes all equipped with a variety of abilities, characteristics, motivations, and oddly enough, weird-looking costumes because they are humans after all. And apparently, this city is open for superheroes and civilians to all cohabitate with each other, which is pretty bizarre. Aside from a plethora of heroes to be named, the show has some key side characters who are allies to the Tick and Arthur, such as the American Maid, the Fledermaus, the Sewer Urchin, the Human Bullet, Big Shot, Crusading Chameleon, Carmelita, and Speak the Pet Rodent. And then you have some others throughout, like the Civic-Minded Five, consisting of the Four-Legged Man, Carpeted Man, Feral Boy, Captain Mucilage, and Jungle Janice. And then there's Jim the Doorman, Mighty Gripper, Jet Valkyrie, Fish Boy, Taft, Bipolar Bear, Project Shave, the Mole Men, Captain Decency and the Squad, Eclair, and Blitzen. Then you also have some non-superhero heroes like Professor Ikebana, the Mayor, and Doodlehead. As for the villains, you have some who appear on and off on certain occasions like Chairface Chippendale, Professor Chrome Dome, Dean the Henchman, Dinosaur Neil, Mr. Mental, the Breadmaster and Buttery Pat, El Cid and the Busy Bee Twins, the Brainchild and his dog Skippy, the Terror, and the Midnight Bomber. And then you have some villains who only appear once like the Idea Men, Zipperneck, Boils and Forehead, the Red Tick, Thrakazog, Pineapple Pocopo, the Lava Man, Man-Eating Cow, Human Ton, the Swiss, Omnipotus, Milo and Venus, Mad Manny, Ottoman Empress, Pig Leg or Deadly Bulb, Betty Queen, Multiple Santas, the Infinity Ball, Finn the Dolphin, Atomic Robot Zombie Men, Indigestible Man, Aztec Warriors, Violent, Julius Pendecker, Octo Paganini, Dr. Mung Mung, the Hotel Manager, Uncle Creamy and the New Creamy, and Sewer Czar. And then you have some minor villains like Crease, Harriet Curse, Rosebud, Proto Clown, The Haze, Brute Bouquet, Gingerbread Men, and The Tongue. And last you have some historical names who appear in episodes like Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Edison, George Washington Carver, Gutenberg, Benjamin Franklin, Mona Lisa, and Joseph Stalin. Throughout the series, the Tick and Arthur usually get themselves into some sort of a situation that allows them to save people in harm's way, whether it's from bank robberies, a villain who's trying to take over the city with some sort of a motive, as well as situations that kind of become more on the fantasy side, but doesn't take away from the show per se. Aside from that, there's really nothing else to show in terms of storyline that makes it entertaining, except that is, the real highlight of this show is actually its ability to have the continuity within episodes involving humor, side storylines, and side characters. For example, in regards to humor, the Tick is actually pretty hilarious with his humor, puns, and quick comebacks that make him really enjoyable to watch. Despite him getting his ass kicked a few times, destroying properties as he jumps from rooftop to rooftop yelling his famous catchphrase, "Spoon," before any action, a lot of times he's very innocent and cherishes the small things for the first time, like celebrating Christmas, taking care of his mustache, or even understanding the value of $1 when Arthur kicks him out for spending too much money on useless equipment. You can't help but to like the guy for his enthusiasm and high maintenance energy. Next, you have the side storylines. This is probably a cool indication that the writers really cared about the show because in one episode, Chairface uses a laser to carve his name on the moon, but thanks to the Tick and Arthur, he wasn't successful and only the letters CHA were visible. So throughout the episodes, they briefly continue to show the moon as it looks hideous and even send the Tick up there to fix it, to only be encountered by a giant planet-eating villain named Omnipotus, who's like a Galactus knockoff of Marvel. By the end of that episode, not only does CHA turn into just HA, he spares Earth due to the Tick's request, and as a minor incentive, he takes a bite of the moon, which is also shown until the end of the series. Then you have a funny incident involving news reporter Sally Vacuum, where she gets tangled onto a giant whale named Blowhole who only appears every 10 years to run across America. She is hilariously never seen again and gets replaced by a new news anchor, Brian Peenhead. And last, when it comes to all the numerous heroes within the city, aside from always hanging out at the diner drinking coffee, the Fledermaus is one of my favorites because he's absolutely useless. He doesn't participate in any action, lets the police handle the villains, and just flirts with any attractive female even if it's a villain. He may look like Batman, but he's far from it. And then you have another character named Big Shot who's like Marvel's The Punisher but on crack. Eventually, at some point, he goes to therapy for his wild twitchy behavior, which is hilarious. The cool part is there's a place called Captain Sanity's Superhero Sanitarium where the characters can go for therapy. However, there's one character named Sewer Urchin who constantly reeks and lives underground and always gets made fun of for not getting involved for any crimes taking place on land. But in one episode, you learn a lot more about him as you find out he's actually a pretty cool badass, immensely rich, has a nice lair underground, and practically is worshipped for his heroic bravery fighting creatures down in the sewer. On a side note, the first episode showcased a hero named Clark Oppenheimer, who's practically Superman but failed to find any place to change into his outfit when there was crime. Sadly, he was never seen again. Other than those two, characters like American Maid is laid back as she drives her croissant car, the human Bullet's wife is basically embarrassed her husband is a superhero, and everyone is practically goofy. Other than that, the Tick practically faces interesting dilemmas as he fights himself as a sick version, a giant loaf of bread, or turning into a vegetable. But because he eventually becomes a well-known established superhero, he ends up being summoned for a month as a trade with heroes in Belgium as part of the superhero exchange program. And not to mention, he even becomes a teacher during his 4-week trial program to train new and upcoming superheroes, which was pretty funny seeing how they're all diverse. As for Arthur, he's basically the sensible one of the group as he adapts into the superhero world but struggles to keep up with financial situations, his physique, his sister Dot accepting of his career choice and lifestyle, builds a romance with Carmelita, learns about the origins of his costume, as well as learning to be a trustful sidekick when not receiving the spotlight, seeing how there's a place called the Comet Club, where superheroes can hang out at a nightclub, but because he's a sidekick, he winds up being told to be at the Sidekick Lounge instead with the others. Aside from this, we find out he's also Jewish and that his sister ends up falling in love and marries Dinosaur Neil. But that doesn't mean the villains don't have their own fair share of entertainment. Once a year, they have their annual enemy award show for who conquers the city the best, as well as an evil cafe where villains can hang out and talk about their problems. By the end of the series, the show tends to drift away from characters, the city, the more normal-ish scenarios, and heads into a far-fetched sci-fi fantasy aspect, as the Tick and Arthur face aliens, travel back in time, shrink into little people, or even face Aztec warriors. Since the Tick enjoys talking to himself and breaks the fourth wall a lot, aside from always giving inspirational wisdom before the credits, some episodes show him and Arthur being interviewed about their experience as heroes, sometimes having a cameraman around documenting their adventures for a TV show that includes many more heroes, and even reading fan mail answering questions about their life. This show is actually pretty entertaining and has a lot to offer, even if a lot of times things don't make much sense. Despite not being a proper ending to the series, these 36 episodes were enough to keep me engaged regardless of minor fillers, but didn't take away from the action or humor. The animation is awesome and the theme song fits the show's aesthetic, and all the dialogues were nicely voiced by all the actors, giving each character a distinctive trait to really stand out. Although not every character in the show had proper storylines, backgrounds, or even reasons to care about them, since there were a lot to keep track of, it's definitely a show to really enjoy. Sit back and relax at what's going on without questioning any logic. Therefore, the Tick the Animated Series gets a B/B+. Thanks for watching, give a like and subscribe for more animated series reviews, and stay tuned for the next episode.